It's great to welcome to the program today Ned Lamont, the governor of Connecticut. Governor, it's so great to have you on. You know, my audience knows I really like talking to governors because you are administrators in a way that our friends in the House and Senate in Washington, D.C. simply are not. It's a different role, it's a different job. And so, where I want to start with you today is when you, as governor, are dealing with the on and off tariffs and the market instability and the things we are seeing from the Trump administration, what are the kind of nuts and bolts of the issues that trickle down to you as the governor of a state related to that you are contending with?
Hey, David, great to see you. Yeah, you're right. Governor's a different role. If you're a senator, every day you can do this to Donald Trump. And if you're a Democrat, because you think he's fundamentally compromising core values in the Constitution. If you're an attorney general, you sue him every day because you want to make sure that they stop cutting funding for kids in need. If you're a governor, you're in a slightly different role, trying to find places where we can agree and more likely where we don't agree, but not necessarily fighting all the time. I work pretty closely with red state governors, and I say, for example, I'll get to tariffs, but I'll say, when it comes to Medicaid, you guys are going to get hit even harder than Connecticut is because you have more rural hospitals. Let's work on this together to see what we can do to save, health care for those folks. Tariffs for me, if I look at it through my Connecticut lens, it's a tax on people. It's a six-letter word for tax. I just came from a food bank where pineapples imported from Costa Rica are going to cost 20% more, unless Donald Trump changes his mind again. And that uncertainty is really tough for a governor and not too easy for business folks trying to figure out whether to invest or not.
One of the things that some fellow Democrats in Connecticut have proposed to offset the federal government cuts in places like healthcare, education, childcare is to increase state spending to offset that, to keep level funding for some of these programs. The sort of more deficit hawk type folks are, of course, concerned about the sustainability of that financially. Talk to me about how you're thinking through those cuts and what you can do at the state level and whether the debt aspect of it is a concern.
Whole thing is a concern. And let's say I get a third of my budget is paid for by the federal government. Let's say I have 7,000 employees, including at the Veterans Hospital, who are subsidized or paid for by the federal government.
Yep.
We got, say, $6 billion of Medicaid alone is paid for by the federal government. So, look, there's no way that we, the state taxpayers of the state, can make up for that shortfall. Some of my fellow governors are pretty tough. They're saying, we can't make up any of that shortfall. We don't want to get into a battle of this is necessary, this is less necessary. I've tried to say, look, we're going to do everything we can to protect the most vulnerable. We've got the ability to do that, and that's what we're going to do. There's no way I can make up that entire shortfall. We're going to have to find some alternatives.
When it comes to immigration, I had Governor Hochul on the program about a month ago, and she said, I'm paraphrasing here, that she will really direct police and law enforcement to cooperate with this mass deportation scheme only to the extent required by law and not any further than that. Within 48 hours of her statement on the show about that, the Trump official Twitter rapid response account clipped that and said, look at what this irresponsible governor is doing. She wants undocumented this and criminal that. So it was completely kind of spun around. I want to hear about your philosophy when it comes to the immigration policy of this administration. Connecticut is considered a quote, sanctuary state. What are you doing with regard to cooperation or lack thereof with federal immigration authorities?
There's a misnomer out there that undocumented criminals are walking around the streets, and that's just BS. We are very strict in terms of getting anybody dangerous off the street, criminals off the street, those who have committed felonies off the street. And maybe like Kathy Hochul said, we work with federal, be it, DEA or ICE, whoever it might be, when it comes to those criminals. That said, my law enforcement, the New Haven police, don't ask the immigration status of people who commit low-level crimes, be that speeding or jaywalking or even shoplifting. That's just not what we do. Now, so I'm not saying, hell no, we don't work with you. I'm just saying we don't work with you because we are doing our job and you do your job. And I think I'm very careful about this. I really care deeply about the fact that a lot of our kids now, Hispanic kids, trans kids, just don't feel comfortable going to school. I want Connecticut to be a safe haven. I want our schools to be a safe haven for these kids. And I really worry about all this talk about mass deportations and the agents going to our schools. That's bad. We're not going to stand for that.
Are you getting pressure from the federal administration that they're not pleased with the way that you're handling this?
No, I haven't gotten that, but look, they asked us to sign an affidavit that said if you don't get rid of all references to DEI in your K through 12 education, we're going to cut all your funding. And we said, look, we're honoring federal laws. It goes to Title VI. We don't have to sign an affidavit necessarily. We have FEMA, they provide a lot of emergency relief for us.
Yep.
And they've gone to our Connecticut Guard and they said, if you don't do this, that, and the other thing as regards, immigrants, we could cut off all your federal funding for emergency response. It's just insane. A lot of our FEMA funding goes to things like cybersecurity. That doesn't just protect Connecticut, that protects America. So it's a complicated situation, David.
What's your instinct as to the so-called real purpose behind the DEI related push, remove all of these guidelines, don't have these programs? Because it's hard for me to imagine that Donald Trump on a personal level is really that hell-bent on not protecting certain groups, or like I'm trying to figure out as an administrator what you're inferring as to the real goal of this. Is it to virtue signal to people who funded his campaign? Is it because they'd rather see the money allocated differently for political gain? Or what do you make of that?
I think he confuses affirmative action with quotas. I have folks going out and I work my heart out to get more teachers, more male teachers, more teachers of color. When it comes to recruiting for state government, I go to every community in the state, regardless of background. I say, we can provide some of the training you need. We want you involved here. I'm not saying no, I'm not favoring one group over another, but the outreach is very important. I tend to think that Washington and the Trump administration thinks about DEI as quotas, and that scares people.
I want to talk to you a little bit about blame and governors, because if I kind of point us back to 2010 and the Affordable Care Act, we had this incredible situation where Obamacare was passed. And one of the aspects of that was that governors could decide to or not to do the so-called Medicaid expansion. Red state governors disproportionately didn't do that expansion. And one of the things that ended up happening in the 2012 election was that many voters in red states said, I heard about Obamacare and nothing happened in my state. I blame Obama. And of course, the real blame was with the administrator of their state, the governor, that said, we aren't going to do that expansion. This is more a political question than a practical question because it comes to do with framing and optics. But do you face those same sorts of situations today where there are circumstances that are a result of federal policy, but that you as the governor of Connecticut, in a sense, the buck stops with you with regard to who is going to get blamed? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, by the way, J.D. Vance told me that Donald Trump saved Obamacare. I heard him tell that to us.
Yeah.
So remember that when you're talking about making all these cuts to Obamacare and expanded Medicaid. Look, my job is to fight for my state in any way I can, fight for those that are most disadvantaged. We did expanded Medicaid. We got more of our people insured than just about any state in the country.
Yeah.
We did. That keeps us safer, less measles, less COVID as time went on. It works and it makes a difference. To your bigger question, you got to show people that these initiatives are not just words, that they make a difference in people's lives. And I think that was part of what we learned in the last election. I mean, whatever you think about Joe Biden, I think the infrastructure bill he got through is probably one of the most important things that passed since I've been around. I've been around a long time.
Yep.
We have old infrastructure in this state. We're speeding up rail, we're speeding up roads, we're putting people to work. We got to do a better job of saying these initiatives are making a difference in your lives. I think, to your point, some people just didn't see it or feel it.
What are some of the specific things in Connecticut with regard to infrastructure that maybe our audience, in Texas, which has its own set of circumstances, or Oregon or whatever, what's sort of specific to Connecticut infrastructure right now that's important and needs to be funded and improved?
That our rail from New Haven to New York was 15 minutes faster 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And now we are speeding it up again. And I'll be able to get you from New Haven to New York in same amount of time as it takes to get from, New London to New York. We're really speeding things up. We're a state that makes a big difference. More time at home with your family in the morning, easier to get to work, less time, sitting on a road. What that means in terms of the environment, getting you out of cars. These are the type of things that make a difference. They don't happen overnight, but I think people are already beginning to feel it. We've taken 10 minutes off that commute already. People notice that.
Why has it slowed down 15 minutes over a period of decades when you would imagine it should be getting faster, not slower?
Yeah, great question. We got these old bridges. They're built by, William McKinley, Donald Trump's favorite president. They go back 120 years. We got to slow down as you go over those. Old signalization, so the trains slow down on their way into a station, then speed up again. Just straightening out the tracks so you can go a little faster. Look, we're not China, so that Shanghai to Beijing, those tracks go straight and they go 200 miles an hour.
Yep.
We'll never be that because we're a democracy and sometimes have to go around Mrs. O'Gillicuddy's home. But that said, we can still take 10 or 15 minutes off of your commute, and that's what we're doing.
Governor, last thing I want to ask you about, at the national level, a lot of the feedback I get from my audience is, I don't see Democrats having a real clear and coherent vision. I know I don't like Trump, but the reason to vote for Democrats in the 2026 midterms is a little blurrier. I'm not sure exactly what Democrats stand for. I understand Trump's bad, but why should I vote for you? Can you talk a little bit about how much does the national concern after everything was lost in November affect you and Democrats in Connecticut? And are you as a governor operating in a different political environment than that? Or are you also dealing with some of that same discontent?
I hear that discontent all the time, but the choice is clear. I mean, he wants to have a significant tax cut for millionaires and billionaires and pay for it by taking away health care for your grandmother at the nursing home or your daughter who's about to have a baby in regards to Medicaid, cutting back on Obamacare, like we said. I think that Democrats have got to do a better job of saying how they're fighting for you every day. He's fighting for they, them. We're fighting for you.
In other words, the Trump is bad. You agree it's not enough. There needs to be a positive vision that's put forward.
Look, the world is a lot less safe than it was before. We're better with our allies. He's pushing away our allies. He's treating our allies like enemies. Look, we just lost $2 trillion of market cap. That means your 401k is weaker and you're not as wealthy as you were just 3 weeks ago. Elizabeth Warren, she wants to have a wealth tax. That's 1% a year for 15 years. They did that in 15 days. So I think we can make a pretty strong case that they're not helping the big middle class in this state and in this country. And Democrats are getting on our high horse and ready to go.
All right, we are going to follow and see whether that holds through over these next couple of election cycles. Governor Ned Lamont of Connecticut, really appreciate your time and your insights today.
Nice to see you, David. Thanks.